just heard about Bartimaeus, a man with not even a name of his own. His name, Bartimaeus, is a descriptor. He is the son, or Bar, of Timaeus, and he's sitting by the roadside begging. Like many of the homeless in our world today, Bartimaeus is overlooked or ignored for the most part. He is useless to many who pass by, as useless as a large black trash bag filled with rotting food. But as many who subsist by begging, Bartimaeus has learned that he cannot sit idly by and expect the good passers-by to share their abundance with him. So he yells out loudly. Sitting by the side of the road, ignored for the most part, does have the advantage of allowing you to hear conversations of passers-by who don't even acknowledge that you're there, or think that because you cannot see, you can't hear either. Today, Bartimaeus has heard that the teacher, healer, Jesus, a Jew of growing reputation, is coming through town, and he has nothing to lose, so he cries out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Naturally, his crying out from his rags and ruins on the side of the street disturbs the senses of the good citizens. And so they say, "How dare he? What does this beggar think he is doing, yelling for Jesus? Doesn't he know that Jesus is too busy to be bothered with someone like him? He's not worth Jesus' time. He has bigger problems, more important problems to deal with than this blind beggar." But the more the good, upstanding people tried to quiet Bartimaeus, the louder he yelled, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stops in his tracks, turns to look at the disheveled blind beggar, sees his desperation and need, and tells those around him, "Call him here." And not wanting to go against the wishes of Jesus, they do just that. Bartimaeus throws off his cloak, springs up, and comes to Jesus. The image of his energy and excitement and being called to come to Jesus is wonderful. He doesn't just drag himself up and make his way to Jesus. He throws off his cloak and springs up and comes to Jesus. And Jesus asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" Is this a test? Did Jesus want to know how far Bartimaeus would go with what he wanted? Surely Jesus already knew the heart of Bartimaeus, that all he wanted was his sight to be restored. Bartimaeus responds, "Teacher, my teacher, let me see again." The statement is so simple. What do you want me to do for you? The answer is simple as well. My teacher, let me see again. Jesus tells Bartimaeus that his faith has made him well, and Bartimaeus' sight is restored, and he follows Jesus on the way. And although this seems straightforward and simple, we know that there's a whole lot more here for us as well. There's so many ways that we can lose our sight or lose sight. Many that don't involve losing the physical sense of vision at all. Not only do we have the tendency, like those gathered around Jesus, not to see those in the margins, but we can also lose sight of our purpose or lose sight of our goals. We have all sorts of sayings that involve seeing, but not in a real physical vision sort of way. We say we can't see the forest for the trees, meaning that we overlook the big picture by focusing too much on the details. Or I can't see where you're coming from, meaning I don't understand your perspective. Actually, wouldn't it be nice if we use that saying a lot more often these days? I can't see where you're coming from. It's so much more helpful than saying you and everyone else who does not agree with me is wrong. Still, seeing or not seeing alludes to much more than being able to physically visualize objects. And we, like Bartimaeus, should be rushing to Jesus for him to restore our sight. Seeing is sometimes hard. Sometimes the things we need to see make us uncomfortable. Perhaps we need to see our own shortcomings, or where we've turned away from following Jesus. Perhaps we need to see the log in our own eye before we search out the speck in the eyes of those with whom we disagree. Maybe we need to truly open our eyes and see the problems in our community and in the world, rather than being blind to the plight of those in our midst. So often, it's easier to be blind than to have our eyes truly opened. I recently encountered a description of Annie Dillard's book, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, where Dillard describes studies done on folks who recovered their sight after years of blindness. These people were enabled to see after doctors had discovered how to perform safe cataract operations. And Dillard writes, in general, the newly sighted see the world as a dazzle of color patches. They learn quickly to name the colors, but the rest of seeing is tormentingly difficult. These people have no idea of space or distance, and so they walk around bumping into sharp edges of the color patches, only then to realize that they're part of something substantial. Some people find their new sense of sight so difficult and frustrating that they refuse to use their new vision and lapse into their old ways of perceiving things. A doctor reported of a 21-year-old woman who had regained her sight in this way. Her unfortunate father, who had hoped for so much from this operation, wrote that his daughter carefully shut her eyes whenever she goes about the house, especially when she comes to the staircase. And she's never more happier and at ease than when, by closing her eyelids, she relapses into her former state of total blindness. Another patient is reported to be so upset by the difficulty he has in learning to translate what he sees into something he can understand that he says he can't stand it anymore and wants to tear his eyes out. Dillard also notes that for some, regaining the sense of sight is accompanied by a sense of shame. She writes, a blind man who learns to see is ashamed of his old habits. He dresses up, grooms himself, and now tries to make a good impression. It seems that having sight restored is not without complications, but sometimes the hardship and difficulty is far outweighed by the end result. In the Book of Joy with the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, both faith leaders described over and over how joy springs out of hardship. Going through hardships in life, like apartheid for Archbishop Tutu, and being exiled in a foreign country as the Dalai Lama is, has given each of them an opportunity to see differently. Rather than experiencing these hardships as detrimental, they've used difficulties as opportunities to have new vision of the world. Rather than being hopeless and despairing, they have both hope and joy. When our eyes are open to the world around us, it may be painful at first. There's a lot of pain and suffering in our midst, and in many ways, it would be easier to go through life with blinders on. But as the body of Christ in the world, we are called to give vision back to those who might actually prefer to be blind and not have their eyes open to the reality of the world around them. When our sight is restored, we can be open to the possibility of new life, broader life, bigger circle of friends, and a new understanding of how big our world and how small our world really is. We may no longer have on blinders to others, but have new eyes to all made in the image of God. In Annie Dillard's book, she also describes the wonder of learning to see again. She writes of a little girl who visits a garden. She's greatly astonished and can scarcely be persuaded to speak. She stands speechless in front of a tree, which she only names and takes hold of, and then as the tree with the lights in it. Another woman was so dazzled by the world's brightness that she keeps her eyes shut for 2 weeks. At the end of the time, she opened her eyes again. She didn't recognize any objects, but the more she gazed upon everything about her, the more could be seen how an expression of gratification and astonishment spread over her. She repeatedly exclaimed, "Oh God, how beautiful." When our eyes are open to the world around us, not only do we see the needs, but we're given the same opportunity to see those around us and exclaim, "Oh God, how beautiful." And so, let us join with the blind beggar on the side of the street and pray, "My teacher, let me see it." Amen.